A ship we don't recognize is flying to a planet. We skim over a miserable-looking city, complete with dark clouds and lightning so you know it's proper grim, and aim for a floating construction of some sort. It's a medical center from the looks of things, which would explain why the guy we're following gets scanned for illnesses. He's a trader, it seems, though his wares may not be entirely above board according to his potential buyer, who I recognize as having played the bad guy Durant in cult superhero film Darkman. As an aside, he's not the first Darkman actor we've had on the show, as Chaotika's henchman was in it as well. As a further aside, checking this took me down a rabbit hole where I learned that, as well as a failed TV series that never got past the pilot stage, there were 2 sequels to Darkman. In a curious coincidence, the last of them featured a certain Roxanne Dawson. It's a small world in Hollywood. But I digress. Durant isn't interested in what Shifty Trader is selling, as he's been burned before by his dodgy goods. But Shifty Trader has something special for Durant this time, a certain medical hologram. This is all news to the Doctor, who's understandably a tiny bit fucking furious at what's happening. He demands to be released and says he won't treat anybody, but that latter point is going to be a problem. His programming won't permit him to ignore those in need, and seeing some patients brought in from a mining accident, he begins work while decrying the quality of the facilities and equipment. Back on Voyager, Kim's received a black eye from playing hockey on the holodeck. Even when off-screen, he's just the guy that things happen to. An attempt to get treated by the doc shows that there's something very wrong, as he's just parroting phrases and going through the motions. The reason for that is because somebody switched his program for a dud, and they've nicked his mobile emitter too, replacing it with a fake. At least Janeway already knows who it is, the Shifty Trader having presumably already left an impression on them. She's pissed off at the lapse of security, which really shouldn't come as much of a surprise after the last 6 years, but at least we have a suspect, so start to follow the bastard. While the rest of Voyager tries to catch up, the Doc is learning how things work on the floating hospital. Supplies are sparse, and that leaves patients not getting all the treatment they need, though another doctor he's working with mentions something called a TC, apparently some sort of classification system for patients. Durant returns and tells the Doc that he's been purchased and will be moving to a different level. The Doc complains, but the other doctor he was speaking to says their central computer, called the Allocator, assigns people and resources to where they can do the most good. His new assignment isn't quite the intensive care unit he was expecting, at least not in the same sense. These people receive the most intensive care not because they're the most ill, but because they're the most important. They have the highest TC, which we discover is not a rating of illness severity, but rather a score on the how much this person deserves to live scale. It's calculated by their central computer, and Durant says it's based on their value to society as a whole. And if the people with lower scores die as a result, well, they should have scored higher, shouldn't they? Durant hands the Doc off to a new guy who we learn is the hospital boss. He treats the doctor like a piece of equipment, though if my experience of managers is anything to go by, that could well be his attitude for all his staff. Voyager's finished following the trail of Shifty Trader. It would appear this isn't his first con job, as the trail was fake, created by a gizmo he left in space. Luckily, he sold us some radioactive material which goes off quickly, meaning he got it from somewhere close by. Maybe wherever he acquired it from we'll know more about him. I think it's more likely we'll find someone else he's fucked over, but we're going to check it out anyway. Unsurprisingly, the mining asteroid we find tells us that he nicked it. In exchange for returning his stolen goods, the guy we speak to tells us where the equipment he was sold by Shifty Trader came from. While Voyager takes the next step in its MMO fetch quest, the Doc is following Hospital Boss on his rounds. A patient is given medicine that a kid lower down in the hospital was refused, not because they have the same terminal condition as the kid did, but because this treatment, administered daily, can also prolong life. That's why everybody on the top floor gets them. The Doc's obviously not impressed, but Hospital Boss explains that these patients contribute more to society. With the central computer system allocating values to everybody, society as a whole has improved. For the people who survive, anyway. Sounds like bullshit, and the Doc returns to the low-priority patients to check on the kid. He's doing badly, says the doctor from earlier, not least of which because the treatment he's permitted has been cut further. His TC number doesn't permit anything more. But what if that number changed? What if we told the central computer that the kid was, for example, an expert on neutronics? The attempt fails as the computer has no evidence of this. There's more than one way to game a system though, and the doc has access to a whole load of patients who are allowed the medicine he wants. And if they're accidentally overprescribed, well, it makes sense to use it elsewhere, doesn't it? Just think of how much paperwork returning it would have caused. Voyager's quest chain to track down Shifty Trader has gained a number of new links, each one leaving Janeway one step closer to doing a Tuvix on the bastard. The final link is a love interest, and after convincing her that there's no competition from Janeway and we're here on business, she tells us that he's at a gambling tournament. As Voyager's tearing ass all over the sector, the doc's getting a new ass torn by the hospital boss. The medicine that he's borrowed, distributed with help from the low-level doctor and kid he treated, who wants to be a doctor himself someday, has helped many patients. That much stuff disappearing has been noticed though, and the hospital boss wants to know what the flying fuck he's playing at. Rather delightfully, instead of giving an excuse, the doc teaches him how to play the system too. If he does well with fewer resources, then he'll be allocated less next time. If, on the other hand, he overorders, then he'll always have what he needs. After all, he doesn't want to risk his performance score by being under-equipped, does he? And if we're left with extra at the end of the day, well, the doc can clear up the discrepancy. The hospital boss is smart enough, or has sufficient self-preservation, to see the wisdom in this, and when Durant asks if there's a problem, he covers for the doc. The argument is so convincing that the doc has managed to organise a permanent arrangement with the hospital boss to funnel medicine downstream. The results are already starting to be seen, and the kid who was dying is nearly ready to be discharged. A shame then that he doesn't want to be. If he's well, he'll have to go back to working in a refinery and never get the chance to train as a doctor. That TC score may be harder to influence than we've been led to believe. Voyager's quest chain is nearing completion. We've caught up with Shifty Trader and, with a bit of careful ambushing, grab him in a tractor beam. He claims to have no knowledge of the doc's whereabouts and tries to scarp her, but Janeway is all out of shits to give and just teleports the bastard to the brig. Sounds harsh, but at least he's doing better than that kid the doctor saved. He's been moved to the lowest level of the hospital, the one where they put all the corpses. According to Durant, with whom the doc has started an argument, the kid developed a secondary infection and died as a result. He couldn't be treated for it as he was already over his allowance due to someone giving him unauthorized medication. All the other people he's treated have been similarly noted and are going to be sent home as a result, probably to die. They've already used their allowance after all. And now the doctor's program is being controlled directly by the central computer, locked to the top level and given strict time limits for treating each patient. That's the problem with gaming the system. Those who created it have the most to lose from its flaws being exposed, and will act accordingly when threatened. Speaking of threats, both Tuvok and Neelix believe this is the preferred approach for getting Shifty Trader to talk. Tuvok's is to imply the use of Vulcan psychic shenanigans to extract the data from his head, but that's just a bluff. Neelix, on the other hand, takes a slightly different approach. He brings a meal as a gesture of goodwill to Shifty Trader, and one with only a small amount of deliberate food poisoning in it. Nothing fatal, but it is terribly unpleasant, and the only person who can treat it is the doctor. If only there was someone who knew where he was. Tangentially, it was all the way back in Season 2 where I originally suggested that Neelix would fight like a dirty little bastard. How satisfying to see that proven right, yet again. The doc has summoned the other doctor from the lower levels up to the top by placing a fake call from Hospital Boss. He has a plan to save the patients who are being discharged, but needs the other doctor to smuggle his emitter to the lower levels, in a box that prevents the central computer from tracking and teleporting him, by the way, so points to the writers for covering that. It doesn't take long for Durant to find out about it and travel down there to find out what's going on. The doc's up and running again, so we'll assume there was a good reason why the central computer didn't detect him and just teleport him back to the top. Durant's visit, far from being a source of concern, is actually part of the doc's plan. And the plan itself? Why, he's going to infect Durant with the same thing that the kid from earlier had. And he's put some extra juice in there too that makes the central computer think Durant is the kid, meaning he doesn't qualify for treatment, not unless there's a change to the whole ranking system anyway. The other doctor's losing his shit by this point, but can't do anything. He doesn't have the authority to overrule the computer, so Durant sends him to find someone who can. The someone is hospital boss, but in a surprising turn of events, he tells Durant to go fuck himself. After all, he can't break the rules and treat a low-priority patient. Durant should understand that better than anybody. It might not be the doc's problem soon. Voyagers turned up, and after discovering the doc is linked to the central computer and can't be teleported away, they instead decide on a visit. They arrive as the doc and hospital boss are discussing how some of the patients on this level could be moved up if reclassified, and Durant decides that maybe the allocation system could survive being a little more flexible, after all. Back on Voyager, the doc is catching up with Seven. She's healthy, but he's concerned that the same may not be true for himself. He admits to deliberately infecting someone to force treatment for others, something that clashes with his ethics. Seven can find no fault in his program, and we leave him to consider the implications of this as we fly away. I once worked in a place that brought in so-called efficiency consultants. From what I could gather after the event, their job wasn't so much to actually make things better, but rather to assign everything a number or target while leaving enough wiggle room on the paperwork to make things look like they were better. Thus begins a cycle of fiction following fiction, records and reality achieving ever greater divergence until the whole thing becomes unsustainable. By which time, of course, the original managers who called in the consultants will have either left after seeing where things are heading, or been fired for not delivering the fiction. The new managers will have to solve the problem, and what better way than by bringing in some efficiency consultants? It's in the name, after all. It's likely for this reason that I gained an immediate dislike for Durant when the hospital boss explained that he was a consultant. I suspect someone on the writing team has had a similar experience to mine, as the guy was precisely the sort of utter cock I expected. When you reduce things to numbers, you take power from reality and hand it to an abstract concept, and one that's usually easy to manipulate to whatever goal you choose. The system presented in this episode is precisely that. It's been used to give preferential treatment to those considered more worthy based on some nebulous calculation, but any such system is open to being rife with abuse if your ethics are sufficiently elastic. Want to make sure the well-off stay that way? Well, we can rationalize that. Giving medicine to ill people might make you feel like a good person, but we all know that ill people sometimes die. And if ill people might die, then surely it makes sense to only give treatment to healthy people. That way all of your recorded patients survive, and ensure the staff score a 100% success rate on their paperwork. How efficient. That's basically the argument used here, healthy people given preventative treatment rather than using those same resources as a potential cure for others. Durant himself uses a variant of the same theme with the line, "If the boy had been fit, he would have survived." The abstract concept of a rating has supplanted the reality of treatment, corrupting the very purpose of the system he was hired to implement. But there's an elephant here, isn't there? We've created an argument that weighing the value of human life is inherently wrong, that trading life for life is abhorrent. Yet the Doctor engaged in the very same thing to force Durant's hand. We could argue that he wouldn't have gone through with it and was bluffing, an argument to which I myself subscribe based on his behaviour to date, but that exchange at the end with Seven raises a question mark over this, doesn't it? I personally think the ethical dilemma he's dealing with is that he was able to perform the act at all, rather than it being an indicator of his willingness to carry out the threat. That being said, it would be remiss of me to ignore the possibility, and the implication that the Doc just operates to a different set of value calculations. If that's true, it raises one more question. Were those calculations always there, or is it something he learned from us? End of episode.
Where are they now?
The Section 31 people. They went up to the bridge. I think Janeway's having a chat with them.
This doesn't feel right.
Why?
Well, why dock with us instead of teleporting?
You realize you're talking to the mind of a computer, trapped in a faceless cartoon dog, because of the teleporters, right?
Okay, fair, but that's never stopped them before.
If I had to guess, I'd say they don't want there to be a teleporter log of their visit.
But why worry about that if this is all above board?
It's Section 31. Nothing they do is above board. They literally exist below board. They don't even remember what the board looks like.
And this is supposed to make me feel better.
Oh. I didn't know that's what I was supposed to be doing. There. It will be fine. Nobody knows, and I'm sure the high-tech ship, covered in sensors, had no way of detecting who was nearest the airlock when that fake admiral died.
Actually, can you go back to the other stuff? It were less upsetting. Woof.